Most people think the worst thing a family can do is hit you. They are wrong. The worst thing is when they treat you like a tool, use you until the handle is splintered and the blade is dull, and then act surprised when you finally break in their hands. They think betrayal is a sudden act, a scream, a door slammed, a secret revealed, but true betrayal is a slow burn. It is the silence of 10 years. It is the way they watch you work until your hands are stained deep with the juice of grapes and the grit of the valley. And then they decide that the dirt you've bled into is more valuable than the person who tended it. There's a specific sensation to the Napa Valley soil when it's 4 a.m. and the frost is threatening the year's yield. It is rich, volcanic, and indifferent. It clings to your boots with a weight that feels like history, a physical pressure that reminds you that you are tethered to the earth. Contrast that with the feeling of a corporate contract. A contract is sterile. It is cold to the touch, smelling of ozone and expensive ink, devoid of the sweat and the sun that actually creates the value. Most people see a legacy as a warm blanket, a history that protects you. They are wrong. A legacy is often just a cage built by people who died before you were born, and the bars are maintained by the people who share your last name. They don't see you as a daughter. They see you as a biological insurance policy for the child they actually love. They think they can sell the ground out from under you and keep the house of cards standing. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just working the land. I was becoming its architect. And when you own the architecture, you decide when the house falls. Welcome to Roast and Reckoning, where silence ends and truth begins. Get comfortable, grab your coffee. My name is Lily, and I'm 29 years old. For the last decade, my life hasn't been measured in months or birthdays, but in vintages. While other women my age were navigating city careers, attending bottomless brunches, or traveling through Europe with backpacks and wide eyes, I was in the dirt. I have spent 3,650 mornings waking up to the low, rhythmic hum of the wind machines, those massive fans that try to keep the air moving so the frost doesn't settle and shatter the delicate buds. I know the exact ache in the lower back that comes from 16 hours of harvesting, a dull, throbbing reminder of the price of excellence. I know the way the smell of crushed grape skins stays in your hair for weeks, a permanent, sticky perfume of labor that no amount of expensive shampoo can truly wash away. My hands are not the hands of a 29-year-old socialite. They are calloused, scarred by the quick slip of pruning shears in the rain, and permanently stained at the cuticles. I am the daughter of Richard and Martha, the owners of the Adams Estate, one of the most prestigious ancestral vineyards in the valley. But in their eyes, I was never the heir. I was the help. I was the one who stayed behind while the world moved on. I didn't mind the work. I loved the vines. I loved the way the Cabernet Sauvignon berries felt like small, cold stones in the palm of my hand before the press. What I didn't realize was that while I was nurturing the roots, my family was planning to rip them out. If you walked into the main estate house, past the heavy oak doors and the smell of beeswax and aged leather, you'd see what I call the hallway of achievements. It was a gallery dedicated to Sebastian, my older brother, the visionary. There are photos of him at his elite private boarding school, Sebastian in a crisp silk shirt on a yacht in the Mediterranean, Sebastian receiving some meaningless award for a tech startup that folded within 18 months. His tan was always European, always expensive. Then there was the one photo of me. It was tucked near the back, near the mudroom where the dogs sleep. I'm 16, standing in the middle of a row of vines, covered in mud, holding a soil testing kit. I'm not smiling. I'm looking at the data on a ruggedized tablet. To my parents, that photo was proof of my utility. I was the glorified farmhand who kept the engine running so Sebastian could be the hood ornament. Richard and Martha would host these elaborate wine-tasting dinners for potential investors. They would dress in linen and silk, speaking in hushed, reverent tones about the soul of the land. I would be in the back, checking the temperature of the fermentation tanks, my boots caked in the very soul they were selling. Sebastian would show up late, smelling of high-end cologne and arrogance, and my father would beam, telling everyone how Sebastian was going to take the brand global. Sebastian didn't know the difference between a brick scale and a pruning hook, but he was the son. In the Addams family, being a son was a career path. Being a daughter was a life sentence of service. I remember one specific evening, about 3 years ago. I had just finished a grueling malolactic fermentation cycle. For those who don't know, that's the secondary fermentation where we convert the tart malic acid into creamy lactic acid. It's what gives a great Cabernet its velvet finish. I was exhausted, covered in a fine layer of dust and sweat. I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and found my mother showing Sebastian's girlfriend the Addams family archives. She pointed to the photo of me by the mudroom and said, "And this is Lily. She's our little worker bee. She really has a knack for the physical side of things. It's such a blessing, really. It frees up Sebastian to focus on the big picture." They laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound, like ice in a glass. I didn't say anything. I just drank my water and went back to the cellar. I had learned early on that my voice didn't carry in that house unless it was reporting on the sugar levels of the grapes. The collapse started with a whisper. It was a Tuesday, late, around 11:45. I had just finished a midnight check on the cooling system in the cellar. A sensor had tripped, and I couldn't risk the temperature rising even 2 degrees. As I walked back through the darkened house, my bare feet silent on the cold floorboards, I saw a sliver of light leaking from under the heavy oak door of my father's study. I heard the tension in his voice, a sharp, jagged sound I'd never heard before. My father was a man who prided himself on his composure, but that night he sounded like he was drowning. I stood in the shadows, the smell of my father's specific brand of peaty bourbon drifting through the air. 20 million, he said. The number hung in the air like a guillotine. Sebastian had done it again. But this wasn't a failed startup or a bad real estate play. This was high-stakes gambling in Macau. $20 million in debt to people who don't take vision as collateral. Then came the plan. My mother's voice was cold, pragmatic, and entirely devoid of the warmth she usually reserved for her star. The developer from the city, she said. Henderson. He offered $60 million for the whole parcel last month. If we sell the vineyard now, we pay Sebastian's debt, we settle the taxes, and we retire to the coast. Sebastian gets a fresh start. He can't stay here, Richard. The people he owes, they know where he lives. And Lily? My father asked. There was a pause so long I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Lily is a worker, my mother finally replied. She'll find another job. She's young, she's capable, she has no stake in the title. And honestly, Richard, she doesn't need the money the way Sebastian does. We'll give her a small severance, maybe 50,000. It's for the family. We have to save our son. I stood there, my calloused hands shaking. $60 million. My life's work, my 4 a.m. frosts, the 14 months I spent perfecting the recursive irrigation layer, all being sold to a corporate developer who would rip out the vines and build luxury condos, all to bail out a man who hadn't worked a day in his life. The world didn't explode. It just went silent. A slow-motion collapse of every hope I had ever nurtured. I realized then that I was not a person to them. I was an asset to be liquidated. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I've learned from the vines. The most important work happens underground in the dark. For the next 3 months, I was a ghost. I attended every Sunday dinner. I listened to Sebastian brag about his new ventures and his global strategy, even as he sweated through his silk shirts. I watched my parents whisper over bank statements and legal documents. But while they were planning the sale, I was practicing what I call invisible expertise. You see, my parents owned the dirt, the property lines, the deed to the acreage. But they hadn't looked at the fine print of the valley's regulations or the modern agricultural code in 30 years. I spent my nights in the dark, doing the math, filing the paperwork. I checked the server logs of my private agricultural research, the digital brain of the vineyard. I found exactly what I suspected. Sebastian's IP address had accessed my soil pH models and my proprietary fermentation algorithms 47 times over the last 3 years. He was trying to learn the how so he could sell the what. He was stealing my intellectual property to make himself look like a genius to the developers. But he didn't understand the chemistry. He didn't understand that a model is only as good as the person who can calibrate it. Over the last decade, I had quietly used my own savings, the small inheritance from my grandmother and my meager salary, to secure the primary water rights to the valley's runoff and the deep well access that fed our specific plot. In this valley, land without water is just a graveyard for dust. I moved these rights into a private LLC. Furthermore, I had patented the specific proprietary fermentation process I developed, the Adams Reserve method. My father thought the process belonged to the estate by default. He was wrong. I had filed the patents in my own name as the sole inventor while I was still a student. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating. I was building a cage of my own, and the bars were made of legal precedent and irrigation maps. I kept thinking about the way my mother had dismissed me. I realized I would never be enough for them. And as I worked, I kept repeating one phrase to myself: I won't set myself on fire to keep them warm. I began to dive deep into the technicalities of the reckoning. To the layperson, wine is about taste. To an architect, it's about the bricks scale, the sugar content of the grapes, and the delicate balance of the tannic structure. I had developed a dampening function for our irrigation system. By manipulating the runoff and the subsurface sensors, I had created a system where the vines thrived only under my specific digital oversight. Without the password-protected calibration I provided every morning, the automated system would either drown the roots or let them wither in the heat. My family saw the lush green rows and thought it was nature. I knew it was math. The night of the signing dinner was beautiful, which felt like a personal insult from the universe. The sun was setting over the Mayacamas Mountains, casting a long, purple shadow over the vines. The air was warm, smelling of ripening fruit and the expensive cigar my father had lit to celebrate the end of an era. They had invited the corporate developer Henderson and his lead architect. Sebastian was there, looking smug in a tailored suit, already spending the $60 million in his head. He was talking to Henderson about optimal land usage and residential density. He looked at the vineyard and saw square footage. I looked at it and saw a living thing he was about to murder. We sat at the long mahogany table in the formal dining room. The table was set with the finest china, and we were drinking the 2018 Reserve, my masterpiece. It was a wine with a deep ruby heart and a structure that could last 50 years. Henderson took a sip and leaned back. "It's a shame to lose the brand," he said, "but the residential market is too strong. We'll keep the manor house as a clubhouse, of course." My father picked up the pen. "A great day for the legacy," he said, his hand trembling slightly. Not from guilt, I realized, but from relief. "Wait," I said. My voice was icy, precise. It was the sound of a needle dropping on a glass floor. The table went silent. "Lily, not now," my mother said, her eyes flashing a warning. "We're in the middle of business." "I know," I said, pulling a leather-bound folder from under the table. I slid it across the white linen toward Henderson. "I think you should check the water titles before you sign that, Mr. Henderson. You see, the $60 million you're paying for the acreage, it doesn't include the rights to the 3 primary wells or the valley runoff access. I bought those through my own firm years ago. I also own the easement for the main access road. Henderson's face shifted from professional boredom to sharp interest. He opened the folder. My father's pen stopped midair. "What are you talking about?" Richard snapped. "The water is part of the land." "In the 1970s, maybe," I replied, leaning back and taking a slow sip of the wine I had made. "But under the current Valley Compact, water rights are severable, and I severed them. You are selling him the dirt, Dad, but I own the life within it. If Mr. Henderson buys this land, he'll have $60 million worth of worthless dry dust. He won't even be able to get a permit for a swimming pool, let alone 100 luxury condos." I looked at Sebastian. His face was the color of ash. "And Sebastian," I continued, "I saw your 47 attempts to access my fermentation models. I know you were trying to bundle my patented process into the sale to sweeten the deal. But that process is mine. It's patented under my name. If this vineyard is sold, the Adams name goes with it. But the method stays with me. You can't even make vinegar without my permission." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the crickets outside, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my father's legacy beginning to crack. Henderson looked at the water maps, then at my father. He wasn't a fool. He was a shark, and he knew when there was no blood in the water. "Is this true?" Henderson asked, his voice flat. I didn't know," my father stammered. "Lily, what have you done? This is your brother's future. This is our retirement." "I'm doing exactly what you taught me, Dad," I said. "I'm being a worker. I'm focusing on the physical side of things. It just so happens that the physical side includes the water and the chemistry." Henderson stood up, closing the folder with a definitive snap. "The deal is off. I don't buy dry land, and I certainly don't buy into family wars. My legal team will be in touch to rescind the letter of intent." He walked out without looking back, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. The transition from outrage to begging was faster than I expected. My father started shouting about betrayal, calling me an ungrateful child, a snake in the grass. But then Sebastian panicked. He realized the $60 million was gone, but the $20 million debt remained. The people in Macau weren't going to care about water rights. They wanted their money. He actually started crying, fat, desperate tears, begging me to be a sister. My mother reached for my hand, her voice dropping into that soft, manipulative register she had used for 20 years. "Lily, sweetheart, think of your brother. Think of our home. We can work this out. We can put your name on the deed. Just give the water rights back so we can save Sebastian." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had said I would find another job while I was standing 5 feet away. "I am thinking of the home," I said, "the one I built while you were busy looking at him. You wanted to sell my life to pay for his mistakes. You wanted me to set myself on fire so he could be warm. Well, I'm done. You can sell the house, you can sell the cars and the silver. But the vineyard, it's going to die, because I'm leaving and I'm taking the water with me." It is a specific sound a story makes when it collapses. It's not a bang. It's a long, low hiss of air leaving a balloon. My parents sat in the wreckage of their golden son's future, finally realizing that the glorified farmhand was the only thing that had been keeping the roof over their heads. I didn't stay to watch them pack. I had my own boxes ready, 11 of them to be exact. That's what 10 years of a life looks like when you boil it down to the essentials. My research journals, my grandmother's vintage watch, my soil pH logs, and my specialized laboratory equipment. I didn't say goodbye to Sebastian. I didn't need to. I saw him in the rearview mirror as I drove down the long oak-lined driveway for the last time. He was standing on the porch, looking small and lost in a suit he couldn't afford anymore, the shadow of the house looming over him like a tombstone. I took a flight to Italy the next morning. I had an offer from a boutique vineyard in Tuscany that actually knew how to read a technical journal. They didn't want a farmhand. They wanted a partner, a master of wine who understood that the future of the industry is built on data and sustainability. As the plane climbed over the Atlantic, the sun breaking over the horizon in a way that reminded me of those 4 a.m. frosts, I felt a strange sensation. I wasn't happy exactly. I was grieving the family I wished I had, even as I destroyed the one I actually had. But mostly, I felt spacious. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't responsible for someone else's frost. I wasn't tending someone else's roots. I was my own architect. I chose myself, and the view from here is breathtaking. They say blood is thicker than water. Maybe it is. But blood can also be a poison, and sometimes you have to drain it to survive. My parents still call. They send emails filled with apologies that smell of desperation and requests for loans to cover the mortgage they can no longer pay on a dry vineyard. I don't answer. Apologies are just the sound a door makes when it finally unsticks. It doesn't mean you have to walk back through it. Thank you for sitting with me through this reckoning. If you've ever been the one holding the world together while everyone else took the credit, you know why I had to let it go. You know that the silence of the workers is not a lack of thought, but a gathering of power. Subscribe. You belong here.